us from the Board of Trustees online already, and one call-in user. Is that the call-in user? Are you one of the trustees, or are you? I know Marshall Larry Johns was going to be joining us.
This is Claudia. I just called in.
Claudia, very good. Okay, so we do have some members of the hiring committee on here. Do we know if the other trustees, if any others will be able to join us today?
I do know Alan was planning on attending. I'm not sure if Julian's back in town yet.
Right, I figured Alan might be, but I hadn't heard specifically. So we'll give a couple minutes here.
And I do think Larry's coming on as well.
Okay, good. We thought Tom Marwald from the hiring committee, was he going to join us?
I thought he was.
Okay. I see his car's in his driveway, so.
Yeah.
Mayor Larson, it's Miranda. I'm having issues keeping my video on, so I'd like to jump off and try to jump back on.
Okay, well, we'll give a couple minutes here and we won't start without you.
Okay, thanks.
And Ray, good to meet you, virtually at least.
To meet you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And again, I guess tomorrow afternoon, hopefully get a chance to meet you in person there.
I definitely prefer in person over the virtual, but I know the reality of it. So I appreciate the two opportunities for sure.
Yeah, well, great. Thanks for being here.
Sure.
And for applying.
If I start shivering, it's because the heat went out in the building. So we have space heaters all over the place. So, but I'm sure you're familiar with the nuances of mountain life, right?
If that kind of thing throws you, then you're probably not meant to be up here in the first place, right?
That's right.
I see Alan has joined us, and Tom, welcome. No, we have Claudia from the hiring committee. I think this may be what we were expecting. Is that right?
Seems to be.
Yeah, Claudia
Mm-hmm.
and Tom and Larry from the hiring committee said they could be here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I heard from four board.
All right. Well then, it's 4:03, so actually this is a question for you, Peter, as you just dropped off the bandwidth warning. I wanted to make sure we were recording this.
Peter?
I think because you also lost Karen as she was talking, they may have lost internet because Larry's also off. We could have lost internet at town hall.
Oh, speaking of mountain living joys.
Yeah.
Though that said, I was on a big NASA telecon all last week for work, and the people at NASA headquarters had a glitch midday and all got kicked off by internet too. So if they are suffering from it, I feel like we're doing pretty well.
Their link works pretty well from the space station, but not from Florida.
Oh, that was actually what a big part of the meeting was about, was talking about communicating with the space station. So
I would imagine.
So we'll just give a couple more minutes here to see if Peter, Karen, and the marshal return. Hopefully when Peter returns, it doesn't kick us all off as a new meeting or something.
Okay.
It shouldn't, and you actually are recording. If you look in the upper right hand corner, it is recording.
Oh, that's what the red means.
That's what the red dot means.
Ah.
It's weird being on this side. Those are the things I know.
We'll give them till 4:05. We'll give one more minute before kicking off here.
Sure.
But And Karen just did confirm that it's internet issues at Town Hall. We got the marshal back.
She could come sit in her car in my yard.
Looks like Town Hall's back.
Great.
All right, well, we'll try and get this started here because I think, I think we all have nice, busy schedules and don't want to have this run too long this evening. So first of all, to our candidates, Ray and Miranda, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you too to the hiring committee who put in all the work, hours of work over the last couple weeks, month or so on this. I know we have Trustee Eric Coombs Esmail on here, who is a member of that, Claudia Schaffler, and Marshall Larry Johns and Tom Malwald, who were all part of the hiring committee. And then we have members of town staff, current town administrator Karen, our town planning, Cynthia's on here, I see. And then we have our newspapers representative, John, welcome, and several members of at least a couple members of the public. So thank you guys for coming out this afternoon for this. I recognize that, 4 to 6 on a Thursday afternoon is an unusual time perhaps, but it's, it was part of that discussion about when we worked for both of our candidates, for as many of the board as possible, and for hopefully the public. So since we've heard some of the evening times are more difficult. So, but between today and tomorrow, the in-person meeting from 1 to 3 p.m. at the community center, hopefully many people will get a chance to meet and ask questions like we're going to do this afternoon. So the way that we're going to go through this is we'll just start asking some questions from the board and the hiring committee. And then, well, actually, I'd like a chance. We'll open with let both candidates just kind of introduce themselves, and then we'll start some questions. We'll ask both candidates the same question, and we'll do that for at least an hour, hour and a half. And then towards the end, hopefully, if members of the public have any questions, I know we've gotten some questions from trustees who aren't here, so I'll be asking those in their name, and I'll let you know which questions they've asked. But then members of the public can ask questions too. We can put those in the chat, and we'll sort of collate those because I figure there'll probably be some overlap with questions either on the board list that don't get asked in the first hour or other questions we've gotten from the public input. And we will we'll just have a nice little conversation. So flip a coin here, and Ray, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. I very much appreciate the selection to be one of the two candidates. I have and continue to serve the people of the Peak to Peak region since 2003 in both Gilpin County and Central City. Currently, I serve as the Community Development Director, where I manage planning, zoning, building, historic preservation, code enforcement, economic development, marketing, our website, and other IT matters, among obviously many other areas in a small jurisdiction. In December, I served as the interim city manager during a very challenging time for the community. When I started with Central City, I built the community development department up from nothing but an empty desk, to a very high functioning department that it is today. 10 days ago, I actually graduated from CU Denver with a master's in public administration after 3 years of education through the executive program through that school while working full time. As you are aware from my cover letter, I had planned to start my search to become a town or county manager in a rural Colorado community later in the summer. But I had this opportunity forwarded to me, and it just seemed like it was tailor-made for my skills and my interest. I first got involved in this field, the land use field, when I witnessed the then explosion of development in and around the Denver area in the 90s. And my interest shifted to management following the floods of 2013, which greatly impacted my neighbors and my family, which made me a bit of a citizen advocate and not just a government official at that point. I believe government needs to be fact-driven, responsive to the community while providing transparency in a meaningful way. The best way to accomplish this is to ensure the right people are in the right positions and that they are compensated fairly for the work they perform. The positive results of government are driven by the hard work of city staff, a staff that stays vested in the organization and the people they serve. In reviewing your Envision 2020, and I know you're working on your 2030 plans, the town has some amazing ideas and vision, but needs some assistance capturing the ideas and findings of the plans, such as the DDA master plan, the trails plan, and the gateway plan, and really bring all these plans, and I'm not sure if I captured them all, into the comprehensive plan, which I think is about 8 years old. I believe I can serve in that capacity, since many of the areas raised throughout the plans are very similar to Central City when they started in 2015. Those include the economic development constraints, housing options, wayfinding, marketing, trails plan, resiliency master plan, design code update, a full update of the land development code, which rolled into a full comprehensive plan update in 2017, which was refreshed just last year. These and many more efforts involved working with the city commissions, the public outreach, one-on-one communications with council, the commission, citizens, developers, contractors, staff, other agencies, other departments. In short, no jurisdiction is an island. So you really need to work closely with your partners in any way. For me, it's about following the code, doing what's right, building relationships and finding and building consensus and running with that to show effective government with integrity and through results. That's it.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you very much. And congratulations on the graduation 10 days ago.
Thank you. It was my daughter graduated at the same time, so it was really nice. We have some wonderful photos of me in the hood and her graduating from high school.
Robed up.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you. Miranda.
Wonderful. Thank you as well for this opportunity. My name is Miranda Fisher. I'm the Deputy Town Administrator, Town Clerk for Nederland. And in that role, I also serve as the Planning Coordinator, which means I help with the Planning and Building Department. I grew up in Colorado. Most of my youth years were actually here in Nederland. I went to elementary school, middle school, and high school here. And a lot of that time, I really invested myself in leadership in this community. And I think that that had a big role in kind of where my life took me from there. Prior to making that switch to work in municipal government, I spent 10 years working in social services, specifically helping individuals with disabilities, and I served in a director capacity. I love social services. That's been a big part of my life, but I really had a strong desire to work in municipal government, which is why in 2015, I received my master's degree from Penn State in public administration with the ultimate goal of moving to working for a local government. Didn't happen right away. So when the town clerk position opened for Nederland, I felt like what better place to really do that transition than the community that I grew up in and the community that really helped me become who I am today. So I applied for that role and was honored to be selected as town clerk. Since I've been here, I was able to move into the deputy town administrator role with about 6 months of being here. And it's in that role that I feel like I've been able to truly support this community in a multitude of different ways with the various projects that we're working on. I've been lucky enough to team up with KarenG, our town administrator, and have just helped me be really well versed in what every department here works on. My passion for working in municipal government also goes into my desire to get a doctorate in public administration, and I'm currently pursuing that with an anticipated graduation date of August of 2022. I applied for this role because I feel that my time here has prepared me to be able to transition into being a town administrator. I'm passionate about the work that we do and just want to see that the efforts that I've put in thus far are continued forward and that I can also help at a more enhanced level and take our community to really where we're striving to go as outlined in that Envision 2030 that we are working on currently.
Very good. Thank you, Miranda. So yeah, we're gonna I want to keep this fairly informal, but because it's virtual, you know, obviously gonna have to gatekeep and call on people. So we have a list of questions, and I know that some of the trustees have been working with our advisory boards to develop those questions. So I'm gonna kind of just call on people and then fill in questions based on what I see. or gaps from the list that we've put together. And I think we'll begin with Trustee Coombs Esmail. You had a good one.
Hi, Ray. Hi, Miranda. Very good to see you both here. Thanks for being here with us and for applying for the job. So I am the trustee liaison to the Parks Recreation Open Space Advisory Board, and that board has kind of worked with me to craft the following question, which is, in your opinion, what are the roles of parks, recreational opportunities, and the preservation of open space in small municipalities like Nederland? And what, in your experience, are effective strategies for sustainably maintaining and resourcing such community assets? And I don't know what order we're going to go in. Are we going to keep it Ray then Miranda, or are we going to switch it to Miranda then Ray?
I was thinking we'd alternate back and forth, and since Ray introduced himself first, Miranda, you'll take first crack at this question, and then we'll just alternate after that.
Perfect. So I've had the honor and opportunity to really work closely with ProSAD, and it's been a true honor and definitely a blessing. I think that for me and in supporting that team, it's just making sure that parks are central to everything that we do. For example, in Envision, it's its own full section, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. And so I think that it's important that we're continuing to strive to secure funding and enhance those areas and make them a centerpiece of our community. The GOCO grant and receiving that for the Barker Meadow Parks was a big deal for us because we've spent so many years trying to get it, and we were finally awarded it. And I'd like to continue to take off from that momentum and really work on making sure that we're highlighting grants and opportunities so that we can enhance all of our trails and parks. I'm also looking forward to that trails survey and what we'll gain from that and the insight from that document. Parks and our open space is just the center of our community, and that was shown over and over again in the SWOT analysis that we did for Envision, was that there was a desire to maintain and really treasure our open spaces. So that should be the centerfold as we move forward, just to making sure that we're protecting our areas, we're enhancing them, and we're making them usable spaces. We have so many pocket parks in Nederland that just need a little bit of TLC. And so I'd like to see that we can enhance our parks department, potentially with more funding and more people, so that they can really do that meaningful work to make these a priority.
Thank you.
That was a good answer, Miranda. Nice to meet you, by the way. This is
nice to meet you.
So Central City probably was the last mountain town ever to get a trails plan, which was completed last year, which we were very excited about and was partially funded through GOCO. I actually volunteered as a review committee prior to that to just make sure we knew exactly how our applications would work out and how to make our application stand out. So I volunteered for that. We submitted, we got the full award the next year. So we have a wonderful new trails plan, which was incorporated in the comprehensive plan. So to your question, trails, parks are really about quality of life of the citizens, enjoying, and I mean, it's beautiful in Nederland, and just going out and just embracing nature. It's really, the primary focus is about the citizens. The second aspect of parks and longer trails that connect primarily are, there's an economic benefit associated with that there's money associated with these recreational trails. We recently, so we have partnered with a number of universities, CU Boulder, CU Denver, and Colorado School of Mines for various student projects, which are free. So we partnered with a student just this year through CU Denver, and they did an economic analysis of a segment that we're looking at and whether there'd be a net benefit associated with that. And there was, though we're just starting, but there's clear evidence out there that there's an economic benefit. So essentially increased tax revenue that can go in to help support maintenance of the trails. But ideally you want to have some sort of individual funding source for maintenance. That's kind of the sticky point with it. And what I've seen that's been successful is working with communities, volunteer groups, to partner with the city, the county, and these volunteer groups to go out and help with the maintenance until you can really develop a really meaningful funding mechanism and a devoted source of revenue.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
And yeah, I think, one thing we can do here is Eric, since you just asked that question, if you have any follow-ups or anything right after that would be the time to do it, or we can stage it for a later question if it's enough of a tangential question. So just like I said, we'll try to keep this somewhat informal in a conversation. So if there's something that jumps out at you at an answer that you want to probe at a little bit, feel
Mayor
free.
Larson, I've got one follow-up on this one. This is directed to Ray. Of the $4 million in budget, how much of that is coming from grants versus other sources?
From the city's budget.
Yeah,
So the 4 million
actually it's 5.5, it looks like.
of the total city budget.
Yeah.
Very small portion of that comes from grants. The lion's share of revenue from the city is really from device fees and
Right.
taxes, sales tax. The city gets a very small amount. It's somewhere around 220,000 from property tax. So it's really all about gaming in Central City.
Okay.
The amount of grant revenue hasn't been a substantial amount, though. The city was awarded just at the beginning of the pandemic, was April of 2020, $1 million for the Belvedere Theater. You've probably seen it in the paper in that progress, where we're just starting a pocket park on that literally on Monday. We're through another grant opportunity through CDOT, but that's probably our largest single grant that we've received is $1 million, but technically it hasn't been received yet since we've delayed the project due to COVID.
Okay, thanks.
Well, Tom, since you have actually, let's get through. Actually, I was going to call on Trustee Apt next. Alan, did you have a question for the candidates?
Yes. Thanks to both of you for applying for the job. And you both have very impressive backgrounds. It's going to be a tough choice for the community. So my question is, we have a community goal to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2025. What kind of creative approaches will you take to try to help us achieve that goal? What kinds of things do you think we can try?
I'm on correct on this one.
Yeah, this one will be you, Ray, then Miranda.
So that's probably the weakest area that I'm at, frankly. But what we're trying to do here, and I know Central is quite different than the Nederland in this regard. They're more focused on historic preservation, and I would say generally Nederland's more involved in environmental efforts. So we may not have the same dynamic politically. So there hasn't been as much interest here. That's probably why I'm not as familiar with that. But from a staff level, we have been moving forward with a charge ahead grant and some other grant opportunities to bring in EV charging. The reality is that many car manufacturers are going to full electric very soon. And it's just, that's going to be the reality in the not too distant future. I think it's Jaguar in 4 years is going to be all electric. So that's one area that I'm trying to make some inroads locally to provide some charging stations here for the community, for the gamers, for the visitors, for the residents. And that's one example of how you could start to tap into that. I know the governor has a number of grant opportunities and using COVID funds that you could also earmark towards these types of charging stations or other efforts. But I think I would rely on the expertise. I know there's the committee and then other experts to kind of educate me and figure out which is the best ones to promote and move forward.
Thank you.
For me, a little bit piggyback off of Ray, I'm by no means a subject matter expert in sustainability, and I think that's the members of the Sustainability Advisory Board, both the current and the potential ones that are going to come forward from the vacancy, working with them. But I would have to say, for me, it's committing to keeping that sustainability coordinator. Garrett McDaniel has been such a huge asset for our community and has led so many projects forward that I'd like to see that we find a way to incorporate that position into town, because I think just having a committed person who, whether part-time or full-time, if they can help us to create innovative solutions to reaching that goal. Also from a kind of a planning and zoning we've seen a real uptick in solar panels. And obviously we have Solarize Nederland, which is promoting that, but even past that program, finding ways to enhance that and trying to encourage people to continue to build solar panels. I know that Safe Built is really committed to trying to streamline that process. And they have a desire to create a committee to look at ways of doing green building and what are ways that they can help and support and educate the community about the International Green Building Code. And so they've asked Nederland to serve on that committee. And I think that's another way in which between the sustainability coordinator and the building department, we can come up with a variety of different ways that we can really enhance energy code and get us closer to meeting that goal of renewable energy by 2025.
Thank you. Appreciate your responses from both of you.
Trustee Danforth, a question for the candidates?
Hi, sorry, took me a minute
There
to
we go.
get to my mute button. Well, welcome both Ray and Miranda, and congratulations on making it this far in the process. Obviously, both are very impressive, and I look forward to speaking more with you both. In terms of, questions for you, basically, public and community engagement is really important, especially in these small towns. But sometimes it's akin to pulling teeth. What are some creative ways that you've sought to engage the public?
I believe it's me first.
Miranda, you're up first.
That's a great question, and something that I definitely have cared a lot about since I've been here. I think that we have to find unique and a variety of ways to engage the public. When I first started, it was a really big, heavy social media push, getting things out on all the different Facebook sites. But we've received feedback that's not enough. And so I think it's being creative in our solutions, and that it's anytime we push a message on social media, that we're also looking at making sure it's in the newspaper, it's at the post office, it's at town hall, it's in newsletters. I received some great feedback recently about putting it in maybe some of the food pantry boxes. I think reaching out to different organizations and finding out where they've been successful in reaching people might be great. I know there's a series of towns that do kind of a weekly listserv blast, and I think that'd be great for like a constant contact type newsletter for the town to consider something like that and to work towards doing a weekly update. Really, I have the pleasure of working with Peter, our administrative assistant, who has been creative in making a YouTube channel. And I think that obviously is yet another way in which we're trying to engage. But bigger than that is a commitment to a new website. We have a desire to move to the statewide internet portal, which is a Colorado program that can help us build a better website. I think if we had a better website that was easy to search, easy to obtain information, you didn't necessarily have to feel like you had to do a core request to find something that's public, that's going to be a world of difference. And so we have already applied for that funding and that opportunity. We should find out next week when we should launch it. But my goal is within a year, we have that new website, and that will be the catalyst for improving that community engagement and communication.
What was the question?
How would she do public outreach?
Thank you, Miranda. So we have a hot mic out there. Ray.
Miranda, thank you for bringing up the website. I know from my end, trying to find information on Nederland has been difficult. So I appreciate that you raised that. We went through SIPA, we applied for the Grand Central. I encourage everyone on this call to take a look at it. It is amazing. It's very easy to use, user friendly. Various people have access to it. You can access it anywhere, and you have a lot of control. So I'm glad that Nederland's doing that. That's wonderful. Creative ways, it's kind of the $1 million question. I think I had a whole class on public policy where we just kind of talked about how we can get the message out. And it's difficult when people live their busy lives and they're not interested. What we found that's the most successful is we put flyers in the water bill. And then usually what ends up happening is 1 or 2 people get the flyer, they reach out to us. So it's that open door policy for communication where they're not intimidated by contacting City Hall and say, okay, I received this flyer. Can you tell me more about it? And we tell them whether they're pro or con the issue, whatever it is. And we ask them to share it with their neighbors. And even walking down the street, it comes up in conversation when we have this program. It seems like it's more of that personal touch, which does take a lot more time. Beyond the traditional mechanisms. That's been helpful here, is through those mechanisms. So, but hard question.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Good question, Lindsay. I'm going to follow up here next with one of the questions that unfortunately one of our trustees who couldn't join us today, Trustee Corvalin, Tanya Corvalin. She asked a good one here as this job, and I'm just going to quote her directly. This job, amongst other things, is balancing the demands from a diverse constituency. Can you think of an example in your previous job where you felt pulled from many directions and had to find a compromise based on code and policy? And Ray, I think you're first now.
One example, I think I do that almost every day in this capacity, working in so many different departments, juggling the code and requirements and the political reality, where there may be certain expectations that based on their station in the organization that they don't need to comply with the code requirements, which is of course not the case. We're absolutely blind to that end of it, and we just follow the code requirements, and we are totally open to helping people and working through the process. And if there's some constructive dialogue that can happen to get to that end result, we will strive for that. I can't think of one specific case, but I can tell you that it is a challenge on a daily basis. But you need to hold to the code and to the charter. And if there's a gray area, we will discuss the gray. But the regulations are the regulations as decided by the board.
I think, as Ray noted, and I agree, Ray, that, you know, it's really throughout our whole job. It's obviously trying to hold to code and to policy. The one thing when you asked the question that came to mind for me is short-term rentals. I came in towards the tail end of short-term rentals, but was involved in developing the application policies and procedures for it. And I think that was a very contentious item. And so I think that's a matter of just educating people to what the code is. While there, you know, oftentimes there is not agreement to what the code is, helping them understand it, helping them understand how, you know, the licensing process works and how the occupational tax works and all those pieces, instead of just handing them code and saying, figure it out. I think that's where we really help that diverse constituency, is just walking through it. And here we are a year later, we're doing renewals for short-term rental licenses. And I would say my conversations with people are definitely pleasant versus maybe where it originally was, because there truly is that understanding in the communication. And I think it goes back to kind of, again, the website and community engagement, making it so it's easy to understand. What I've enjoyed about my time here is with every ordinance, there often seems to be a policy and procedure. Accessory dwelling units is another example of that. Whenever we can find a way to truly explain the process, create guides to walk people through it, that helps a lot when working with people who maybe may or may not agree with that code, at least make it easy to understand.
Thank you. I'm going to chime in here with a question for myself on this one, because obviously Netherlands is a small town, small staff, so everything we do is working together. We can't do anything on our own. We have to work together as a team, and really the town administrator role is the head of that town team of all the town employees. So what I'm really kind of curious about is partially your experience in building teams that work effectively together, and what you think sort of that key is for building a coherent team that can really serve the people of Nederland from the town hall position.
I have an honor of working with that small team, and So I'm going to actually take this back though to my old experience. When I was with Acres, Nevada, which is the company I came to Nederland from, I supervised over 200 people, and that was a very split group. And so for me, it's spending time getting to know them. So that was a group home setting. So I really tried to immerse myself into their world. I would spend time, I would work out of their environments, and I would just be there to get to know the different people who are part of that team. And I feel like that effort and time I really carry over into Nederland. I've spent a lot of time in the departments I oversee, working side by side with those employees I work with, but also I've integrated myself into public works in the police department and really try to understand what's going on in their world and how I can best support them. When it comes to teams though, for me, recognition and acknowledgement is number one. I started a program called Thankful Thursday. Well, just around November of the time I started, it was a Thanksgiving thing. And for a year and a half since, every Thursday, I send out a Thankful Thursday message that just highlights an employee and what they're doing and maybe the little things that people didn't think was going on. Our departments can be siloed at times. So this is a way to say, hey, here's the great thing happening at the community center. You probably didn't know about it. And I feel like that program has taken off to the point where other people are doing it. They beat me to it. They send them out before I get a chance to do so. And so I think we've been able to build a culture of appreciation and acknowledgement. And that just makes our team even tighter than it was when I first started. And so continuing that appreciation and acknowledgement and just showing all the departments that I'm there for them, to support them, I will advocate for them, and that I really have their back.
Ray, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, everybody. I had to put everyone on mute because there was background noise. So you will have to unmute yourself when you talk. Thanks.
Am I unmuted now?
Now we can hear you. Thanks.
Great. I'm familiar with Zoom meetings, so apologize. I'm not familiar with WebEx. So I would definitely echo what Miranda said. I think she's spot on with what she had said. For me, it's about reframing the conversation to hear different perspectives. I'm not always right. No one's necessarily always right, but hearing their perspective and then finding where that middle ground is and how it can be accomplished. Team building, as I mentioned in kind of the intro, I started a department from nothing. It's very high functioning. We have an amazing team right now. I'm very proud of the work we're doing. They get accolades from City Council regularly. That team building isn't just the group that we're working with now, with weekly meetings and interactions and keeping everyone informed so there's no surprises. But it even translates to my previous position with Gilpin County, where I wasn't there for, it's been 5.5 years, but I can still walk in there and have a conversation with anyone in Gilpin County and still have that exchange. And if I need help or assistance, we still have that bond, that connection for even in that organization. And I could just see that would translate into a benefit for Nederland. Unfortunately, there's not, in my perspective, there's not a lot of interaction between Nederland, Gilpin County, at least Southern Gilpin County, Central City, and Black Hawk. But I think by bringing me in, then there would be that bridge for assistance where we could leverage all our assets for the common good along the entire peak-to-peak region.
Thank you, Ray. I think that's all the trustees. So I'm going to go through some of the hiring committee, and then we'll circle back to if trustees have further questions that they want to touch on. Just give everyone a chance here to get at least one in before we get it to the first hour. And I think I'll go to our town marshal, Larry Johns.
Thank you, Mayor, and congratulations to both our candidates, highly qualified. And Mayor, just correct me if I'm wrong, but the NEDPEDS project, that was our original project that started the sidewalks and stuff. Am I correct?
Yeah, NEDPEDS phase 1, phase 2, yes.
Okay, so my question for the candidates is, tell me about the original NEDPEDS project and what its impact on town has been, in your opinion.
Ray, I think you're up on this one.
I was hoping I wasn't first on this one. So I believe I read that the city, the town got a large grant. I think it was like 980,000 for some CDOT improvements. Is that what the NEDPED program is, or is that not? Is that something different?
Yes, it was funding for sidewalks and some, pedestrian
ADA.
transportation.
So that's the same one. So from that end, it's all about safety. It's really about so someone can drive through town safely at appropriate speed. It's about a pedestrian can cross the street safely. Really,
Ray, if I can, this is KarenG. I think you're confusing. You're talking about the transportation improvement project.
Okay.
And that's what we just got funding for. Marshall Johns is talking about a project that was funded maybe 6 years ago, something along that line. It was in partnership with the DDA. And it was called NEDPEDS.
Let me just not so much rephrase it, but put it into maybe more perspective. Specifically, Nederland got their first sidewalks, curb and gutter along the highway and some other areas. And it had a pretty significant effect on town. And there was a fair amount of back and forth whether there should be such things as concrete sidewalks in town. And just wondering if either of you guys have history on what that looked like back then, or what do you think maybe it brought to town, good, bad, or indifferent?
So what I would equate that to is probably lighting. I know there's a lot of people in the rural areas that are resistant to lights because they think it changes the character of a community. Obviously, this is a little different, but the sidewalks are kind of the same thing because you're bringing this urban aspect into an area where it's rural and then you're changing the appearance. But I don't have any experience in shifting that, but I think it's really about public safety, why you need to have the sidewalks, why you don't want to have the gravel onto the streets for cleaning the streets and the additional maintenance costs associated with it. You want to make sure that if your mother is walking from one store to the next store, that she's going to be safe. And that comes down to a sidewalk ultimately. I know there's been a lot of development in Nederland. Housing is a big very big importance to the town, and you need to be able to move safely from one point to the next, and the way you do that with sidewalks. But I do understand that there's that friction of that's not how it was done before. But you look for the guidance and the policy direction from the Board of Trustees in this case, and if the Board of Trustees says we're going to have the sidewalks, then you move forward with that, and there's a just cause for why you should do that.
Thank you.
As Karen noted, obviously that's a project that's maybe 5+ years old, but it's very much still in people's minds. When we did the SWOT analysis on the weaknesses, it showed up quite a bit that one of the weaknesses of town was that project. And I think that it's for a variety of different reasons, one of which the material, that crusher find, didn't necessarily work, I think the way in which people had hoped. And I know that there was a sustainability component to it, but I think it's a matter, it kind of goes back to this public vetting of sorts. And I know that the crusher find and the NEDPED project was publicly vetted, but really driving into getting all the stakeholders, doing that ADA accessibility and finding out, are there certain areas where we're going to pool water because we haven't thought about the drainage, and just taking into consideration the long-term components of a project. I kind of think back to even building code. As we talk through building code, while we've done some initial public vetting, it's very important for us to talk to contractors, people who are in mid-builds, people who are going to have that immediate impact, who can maybe help advise us of what the long term is that we're looking at. And I know that NEDPEDs will kind of sit with us for a while, and those sidewalks are very much still there. But as we look to do new projects like the transportation improvement that Ray was initially talking about, or even the GoCo Trail, there are opportunities to correct, I think, some of those maybe missteps. And we just can have an opportunity to learn what did not go well with NEDPEDs and how can we make sure future projects receive all that input for long-term success.
Thank you.
Thank you. How about Claudia Schaffler? I think if you're on the call-in, you're going to have to do *6 on your phone to unmute since we muted everyone. There we go.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can now. Yes, thank you, Claudia.
Sure, of course. Thanks for the opportunity to participate in this. It's very exciting, and I love hearing what you guys have to say. My question to you, since I'm on the Nederland Downtown Development Authority Board, is have you worked with downtown development authorities before? And what is your concept or your ideas on how the town works with a DDA?
I have had the opportunity and the pleasure of working with the DDA. I've been doing so since I started. I've been able to participate in all their meetings, definitely serve as the admin liaison, I think, along with Karen and Rita. I think there's a very important connection. Not only financially, is there often times in which the DDA has funding to support projects that we're going for, or maybe being a grant match, but it's an opportunity to enhance the community. You know, whether it be the public art that's coming forward or the wayfinding, town is going to play a great role in helping to not only maybe guide and advise the DDA, but also work in partnership to solicit that feedback and kind of connect the DDA to maybe some of the same resources that town works with. It's a true pleasure working with the DDA, and I think over the last year, that board has come a long way in making projects really become reality. And a lot of that is truly in partnership with town. There's definitely a big connection between public works and the DDA, and it's been a joy to really see that unfold and the ways in which the DDA too can help us with our infrastructure plans. So for me, that partnership is very strong. It needs to stay that way. And for me, that is a priority to work with that board and the new executive director to keep projects moving forward and that connection between town a priority.
So in my experience in Central, we do not have a DDA. We have a bid, and the bid serves as a mechanism for the construction, or served as a mechanism for the construction of the Central City Parkway and the debt associated with that construction. So that debt is the bid's debt, not the city's debt. But unfortunately, that mill levy associated with that does hamper the businesses in the city at 85 mills, which is very significant. And as you can imagine, with an 85 mil for the bid, there hasn't been a lot of reception with adding another layer on top of that. So I've worked with Downtown Colorado Inc. About looking into creating one and some sort of funding mechanism between the high mill levy and then there's high sales tax in Central City. There wasn't really an easy path of bringing forward any sort of other option. There wasn't that political interest, though we're looking at an economic development commission potentially. But I see it as an absolute important partner in development. It's part of that economic development toolkit that you can bring out the various pieces and you can leverage the various pieces to make things happen. And so absolutely the Urban Renewal Authority is an important component of it. You can look at the enterprise zones. They're a good partner as well. In Central, there's historic preservation tax credits. There's other types of tax credits. In the end of 2020, I worked with Gilpin to bring CPACE program into Gilpin. I know Boulder County already has it, but that's a wonderful program where people can finance energy efficiency improvements for businesses and put it onto the property. That's another benefit. I'm kind of going down a trail here, but the point is economic development is there's many different tools, and I think that the urban renewal generally are an incredible asset for making things happen in the community.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe the last member of our hiring committee who hasn't asked a question would be Tom. And you're on mute, Tom.
I wanted to talk some more about downtown development. You've each had well, you've had different experiences. Could you address what you see for Netherlands downtown and take us down the road over the next 10 years as you see it?
So from looking at the 2030 vision, I'm going to go off of that. It looks like the priority is housing for diverse housing options and then other businesses to support the local community. So from an environmental standpoint, I think it's important to have higher density in the downtown so that people can have, you generally would have less parking requirements. And then the people could park in one location and then walk to other businesses and homes and that sort of thing, which saves the land on the edge or the fringe of the community. And I think that's the answer. I think high density is the answer in the core towns, but it has to be done appropriately, and it has to it has to involve the full community, and it has to have consensus. This isn't something that happens overnight. It's definitely a partnership, but ultimately that's the answer. In Central, for instance, we did away with actually maximum residential units in our downtown core for upper floors, and we lowered our parking requirement because there's a huge demand for housing here as well as there. I mean, we're both resort areas. We have 4,000 or 5,000 employees that live outside of the county, and we are a population of 700. There's a huge demand for housing. So the answer and the best way for the cost of the infrastructure is to put it in the downtown.
For me, with the downtown area, really just being the central business district, I think there's a lot of opportunities to really make that a hub and a central focus. Obviously, there's the Revitalizing Main Streets grant that Chris just applied for with Public Works, and that's going to be able to make a huge positive infrastructure impact there. I also think TIPS is going to help with, and while that's across the street, kind of visitor center focus, it's still going to make that a bit more walkable. Really, wayfinding is big for me. I think that the work that the DDA is doing and trying to make town not only walkable in that sense, but direct people to the different activities and businesses and things that we have going on, including tying back to our parks and recreation. I think that's where I see really our business, or kind of our downtown area being the hub of helping to really spur out connections to other areas. And so those are that's a big area. And then I would say parking. You know, in order for our downtown to be a really great place, we have to resolve our parking issues, and you know, be definitely looking to support the board and engaging in some of those conversations of how do we address parking here. You know, we're limited, and where can we go, but what can we do for parking? Maybe how do we promote sustainability in the sense of making the town more walkable, and just kind of hitting some of the issues that maybe clog up our downtown and don't make it thrive as much as it really could.
All right. I think that's one round of questions done, pretty wide-ranging set of topics. I just think we'll kick in here to a second round of questions from the board and the hiring committee. I just wanted to remind members of the public who are on, if you have questions that you'd like to hear from the candidates, we'll try and kick that off here in another 45 minutes or so. Just put those questions into the chat window and we'll collate them and we can ask the candidates those questions. But we'll just kick off another round of questions here and just kind of do it in a slightly different order to mix it up a little. Actually here, we'll begin with Tanya isn't here, but she has one that we haven't really touched on yet, which was please provide examples, of how you have exemplified transparency with the public in your current position. I think
it's me.
I think you're up first.
I think for me, it comes down to the communication and trying to just make sure that we're pushing information out rather than just being responsive to requests. And so trying to get ahead of that in our website. We created all those boxes on the right-hand side, which is somewhat new to us. And so while our website still needs a lot of work, it is easy to go click on those boxes and get the most up-to-date information. And so that's a big focus of mine and always has been, is where where we're answering questions more so that we're already providing it and we're maybe just providing additional details as people come forward, but not necessarily making the community feel like they're in the dark about things. I'm trying to push out what's going on with town as much as possible. Recently for Envision 2030, I actually made a project list that listed every project that all the departments and all the advisory boards and commissions were working on and linked to where you could get more information. And it's a document that I feel like would be great to keep up with and integrate into our website of just like, what is Public Works working on, or what's the community center doing? And so again, the information should be easy to gain right away. And our website's not necessarily there yet, but we're trying our best so you can just go click on a box or click on a link and get everything you need. And that I think helps greatly with that transparency.
So I would say that it's having that open door policy, getting that information out, making sure that everyone's accessible, that in casual conversations, you say this information is there. Obviously, you use the traditional methods of the newspaper and the post office and the flyers and the website, but you can only reach so many people. Again, I found that it's best when you have these conversations, and sometimes they're hard conversations, which is fine. Everyone has an opportunity to express their voice. Everyone should have an opportunity to hear what's going on. So that's been most successful for me. There was a minor subdivision that's in the works, and the neighbor was very upset about it. And I spent, I don't know how many hours talking to him about the process and the notice and how it's going to work. And in the end, he said, I just trust you that it's going to work out fine. And he kind of went off the side, and I didn't know him before, but it's that engagement that we're not here working against the public. We're here following the code. And if there's any major issues, then it's really staff's burden to kind of bring these issues up to the board to say, okay, we should address this code requirement because it's out of compliance or it doesn't make practical sense or something of that nature. But really, we're here to try and facilitate the process as much as possible.
Thank you. Alan, do you have another question?
Yes, I do. I have one of those questions, a very bright window in my computer. The $64,000 question, those who remember the game show, is what are we going to do about affordable housing? You know, there's the issue of lots of people moving here, a lot of people already here, people having to commute, not enough land, and what is available is expensive. So what can we do to help build more affordable housing? What can we do to make housing more affordable for our residents?
That's me, right? Yes. So an easy way that does, relatively easy. This is, $1 million question that many communities are wrestling with right now. But a way of addressing that is by giving density bonuses. You can bump up the number of units. It doesn't cost the town anything by doing that. And then in exchange for that, it would be deed restricted, that it would be, income qualifying. But again, no one's an island in any of this. There's state programs. I believe there's a program through Boulder County as well that can, we could partner with them on this as well. But that's an easy way of doing that. There could be reductions in tap fees, but I would be concerned about the long-term costs by lowering those tap fees, because there's ongoing capital improvements and maintenance costs that should be really captured. So the easy answer, if there is an easy answer from my perspective, would be to promote density bonuses for affordable housing.
I know our Housing Vision 2030 committee spent a lot of time talking about affordability, and I agree with Ray. It's not an easy solution. And in Nederland, we're seeing a huge spike in costs of housings. And so we've had some conversations, myself and Cynthia Baki have talked with quite a few contractors. And recently we met yesterday or the other day with a contractor and talked about affordability. And there is a challenge there for contractors if it's not incentivized, or there isn't a way in which, they are out to also kind of make money. And so how do you kind of mirror that contractor interest to affordable housing? And I think it's a matter of incentivizing that contractors do in fact make affordable housing, and maybe that's through tax incentives or programs, whether it's Boulder County programs or state programs, and potentially looking into finding ways to promote builders coming to Nederland who want to in fact do affordable housing, because I think we've seen with the few new builds that have come forward, they are not that. And so continuing those conversations about what are the opportunities, and maybe creating that resource for contractors to consider affordability and how they could go about it when they go to build in Nederland.
Thank you.
Lindsay, did you have a question? Think you're still on mute, Lindsay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. What are the 3 top challenges facing municipal officials today, and what actions would you take to ensure that Nederland is effectively prepared to face these over the next 5 years?
That's 3 questions.
I know, I'm like, oh, the 3, okay. So, for me, the first is going to be communication, in the sense of being the ones to share what's going on. I think, you know, I value social media greatly. I think it's an important tool, but making sure that the message gets out. I think oftentimes, as a, you know, if we just keep it within municipal government, it's just within the Board of Trustees or Planning Commission, and we don't share more what happens during those meetings, the message can get misconstrued as it moves forward in the communication process. And so finding ways to do updates on the projects, like I just talked about that project tracker, again, getting ahead of that communication by sharing up front what's going on. For Nederland specifically, I think that the other challenge that our boards are going to face is that growth. We are small, and so we know that our IGA is coming up, and we need to assess that and what annexation looks like, or what it does or does not look like. How do we promote growth in a meaningful and appropriate way? You know, we continue to hear that Nederland, we don't want Nederland to be Boulder, and I value that sentiment, and I think that we need to find a way of kind of embracing what is coming our way, but doing it in a way that still keeps to Nederland's character. And I think just the last piece for municipal government officials is not enough money. And I know that's really kind of a common answer, but you know, Nederland is limited in our budget, and really kind of tremendous work securing millions of dollars in grants, but finding ways to really maximize and leverage the funds that we do have, and making sure that they meet our needs, they address our infrastructure, they move us forward, but committing teams to looking into additional grant funding. We've got department heads who kind of as a side gig get grant funding, but maybe there's an opportunity for different departments to bring forward some of their staff, train them in grant development, and find out ways to really get creative with our funding needs so that we can do more with less.
Oh, Ray, I see your lips moving.
Sorry, I was just talking to myself there. Sorry about that. So for me, I would start more macro, given the last few years and how federal politics are right now. That mistrust in government is a broad umbrella as government as a whole. And I think that burden really falls on the local government to try that much harder to show that local government is responsive, and that local government is the model that the federal government should try and follow, frankly. And so I think we're constantly battling with the national issues at hand, which obviously don't play in with the local end generally, but it's still we're all lumped as one. I think the second part is staffing. I think there's a lot of open positions, and it's very hard to find qualified people. It's hard to pay them an adequate wage. And so we need to have the best personnel we can possibly afford, and how can we best do that? And then that ties right into Miranda's comment about money. It comes down to the priorities, come down to money and important choices and hard choices that need to be made as to how to find the funding to support these important endeavors. Obviously, local government has many, many different expenses, from the roadways, from the utility lines, from law enforcement, all critical services, and we need to find a way of paying for that. And it seems like the pot is shrinking every year, and so we're relying more and more on grant funding. So we need to find something that's sustainable, not just this year, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and how best can we do that? And that's that educational component with the citizens, and say, here's the realities, and how, and if you want a park next to your house, how can we afford it? How can we maintain it? It comes down to the budget, and it comes down to the priorities in that budget, saying this is the priority. So maybe I did more than 3, but that's I think the big areas.
Tom, did I see you raise your hand there? Follow
Yeah.
up?
We've been through a rough year. What's the top lesson through the year of COVID that you've each learned and that you'll carry forward?
That's me, right?
Yeah.
Personal relationships and personal interaction and appreciating every day, I think, has been really important. I'm not a fan of working from home. I'm not a fan of working remotely, and it's been a hard year doing that. And I'm really looking forward to actually seeing people in person and making those contacts.
For me, I think that it's really kind of ironically the power in the benefit of technology. And in the sense of, virtual has been tough, there's no question about it, but we've also seen an uptick in the number of people who have participated in our meetings. And I think that, when I look at our advisory board and commission vacancies, and we have more applications than we do open positions. And that is, in my time here, that's never happened. And I attribute a lot of that to people's ability to really access what's going on at the meetings. They can just quickly call in or join virtually. And while no, I don't want to do this forever, I think that finding a hybrid or finding ways to meet people in this different setting, that's what really came out of COVID. And so I look forward to working with our community center team and our town hall team to find ways to make hopefully things hybrid or use technology in a way that I don't think we would have ever thought to do so if it weren't for COVID.
Eric.
Yeah, I think that we haven't really touched on this yet, but no small part of this particular work is being the primary point of contact and providing support for elected officials like some of ourselves. And I'm just wondering if you have examples or if you have experience of working with elected officials, especially those with significantly different policy positions, different levels of experience, and different agendas, while also having to essentially be a staffer for these folks who are essentially volunteers.
I've had the pleasure of working side by side with Karen, and I think that she set a great tone for that. Of, currently we meet with each trustee independently, and that's an opportunity to really find out what's a priority for them, and maybe it's not in a meeting is not the time to bring that up. And so finding out what they care about, and for me, it's just providing them with the kind of the facts and the resource as town staff. What is it that this trustee may care about, or the board as a whole, and how do we then go find the information that's going to best suit them? And so I'd like to continue those relationships, to continue those one-on-ones, and to just take each opportunity to highlight what's important and maybe figure out when do we need to push that to the full board and when are we ready because we have all the information to do so.
So I've been doing this a very long time, working with elected officials and commission members, and many of them have very diverse opinions on topics. And so a lot of times it's really just listening and getting that perspective and understanding where they fall, and having these conversations offline outside of the board meetings. So you get a good sense, and also trying to address it if you can. Ultimately, it's a consensus, but everyone wants to feel as if they've been heard one way or another. And I think that's really that administrator's job to say, okay, I hear what you're saying. Now, let's see if we can get to this magic number. And in Central, it's 3. And in Netherlands, it's 4, I believe. So it's a math game ultimately, but it's about being accessible whenever any of the elected officials need the administrator. But beyond that, I think really the first order of business for the new administrators to meet with each of the Board of Trustee members individually and have that conversation, say what's important to you, what's important to you. So then you can carry that back and say, okay, in my mind, the numbers for this particular issue is this. And so I can state or kind of move forward with certain directions or bring items up to the Board of Trustees saying, this seems like this is the priority. I thought it was interesting in the vision, the 2030 vision, I think there was 5 or 6 items that were listed as overall items, as goals that were priorities, but in the budget, there was 3. And I thought that was really interesting that there was a kind of a disconnect between the vision and the budget. And for me, the budget is the one that would, I mean, that's where the money matters, and that's where it's important. So connecting all of those dots together is important.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, I was going to actually piggyback a little bit on that, kind of a takeoff question on that I had staged up. And this is not necessarily saying about, dealing with elected officials, but, you are the point, this position is the sort of the point person for the town, like Eric said. And I'm curious kind of what experience you've had in the past with, potentially dealing with unfortunate incidents or difficult people. As I said, not necessarily the elected officials, but what kind of, what are your strategies for dealing with that? Because they may be the constituents that we have to work with, but are make the job a little harder.
I'm upright on this one. I served as the interim city manager in December. Unfortunately, that was shortly after and during the funeral when we lost one of the city staff and a county staff member. So I was facilitating that, unfortunately. So I'm generally, that I don't get stressed out. It's part of the role. You just need to be reassuring and just follow the process and make sure that you're there, you're the leader. I mean, you're trying to help the whole team get through these issues. When it's a difficult customer or citizen, it's important to give them the ear. I seem like I'm a broken record, but I do like talking to people. I like to get hear from people's perspective, and not just the Board of Trustees perspective, but it would be the citizens, the business community, hear what they have to say, because that enriches my process and decision making. I've been with Central 5.5 years. I've been in executive sessions for with City Council for the last 2-3 years. I have a lot of exchange between the City Council and the citizens of this community. And so there's this trust that's formed. It's not something that's instantaneous, but it's important to start, and you start right away to make sure that you're there and available. Because again, everyone has a voice and they should have an opportunity to express it, but sometimes they're wrong and you need to explain why they're wrong.
For me, I try to always be fair and consistent, and I would say that I don't let my emotions get the better of me. I stay pretty even keeled in that sense. My feeling is that every person in our community, whether they're Nederland resident or they're a stakeholder in our community, or even they're just, a visitor or someone from outside, they're all important. And I want to be sure that I'm hearing them and that I'm meeting their needs within reason. There are certain circumstances, as kind of Ray noted, where, code may limit something, or, we can't always give everyone what they want. But again, going back to communicating that and sharing kind of the why, There are and may be in the future people who are not necessarily big fans of mine, and I think for me that won't ever stop me from engaging with them and continuing to support them to the best of my ability. I want to always be a resource. I want to always be responsive, and no matter what that person, their opinion is of me, they're always going to get that same fair and consistent attitude and response.
Thank you. Tom, did you have a second question? I know you did the follow-up on the earlier one, but did you have a second question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I do, but I think it's not, it's more towards Ray. But I noticed on Ray's resume that what he did along the Central City Parkway, it seems like that particular project freed up a lot of assets for the town that weren't there before. Are there, I guess a more generalized question is there, does Nederland have some unrealized assets that we could be using better than we do now?
So I would know more in the organization than outside of the organization. So it's a difficult question to answer. But what I can say is when I started with Central, I went through the organization, even though I wasn't the city manager, but I identified areas where there were shortcomings or cost saving measures. And I saved the city quite a bit in the first year and continued on. So in the first year, I changed IT companies and saved the city, I think it was $8,000. $8,000 is better spent for some other purpose. Just this year, we switched to a new building code compliance company. We left Colorado Code and went with a new company, Charles Abbott. We have a much better ratio now where we're collecting more of the fee. Generally, it's 80–90% goes to the building inspection company. That's no longer the case in Central. We are bringing in more revenue. There's all these little things, and as you put them together, they make real differences.
Thanks. Miranda?
I think that, again, kind of subject matter expert, I would say that Rita Six, when she started, she found us significant savings and opportunities to maximize our budget. For me, in the departments that I oversee more specifically, we have made some changes and adjustments in terms of how much we have budgeted. There were maybe line items that had an unrealistic budget. We didn't need it as such, and so we could move funds around and work within other departments. I guess the one maybe budget, and it's new in that kind of caveat, is the Health and Human Services budget that the occupational tax fund, that those funds go to. We have yet to talk about where is that going, and I know 90% is for Health and Human Services, and I'd love to, while it's small, I think we're probably from last year to this year, maybe only 8,000, that we have that opportunity for a fund that has 20 grand before the year is out. And so really looking into what do we want to do with that revenue. We're having more short-term rentals applications come through, which will only help us to increase that budget line item.
Can I ask one more?
Sure.
Emergency preparedness. It's getting to be summer. Are there, number one, what have you done in your respective communities to be ready? And number two, are there more things we can do as an intermountain region than we're doing right now?
I have to give kind of a huge shout out to Dawn Baumhover. I think that she's done an immaculate job with the Peak to Peak Housing Human Services and the food pantry to make sure that we're ready. For example, the last, when a ward had to be evacuated, the team jumped together so quickly and it moved seamlessly. And looking through that resource closet too, we really are in a great place to support if there were to be an emergency. So I guess for me, it's more kind of preventative. We, in partnership with the fire department, started a hashtag Mitigation Monday project, and it's just more educating people to the risk, to mitigating their property, to making sure they understand their zones. Because I think if something were to occur, our partnership with Red Cross is very strong, that we are ready, but I'd like to not get there and take the measures to do more of that education up front of how can we protect our community and what steps do we need to take.
So Central approved a resiliency plan to address hazards in 2017 that I facilitated. Personally, I'm very fearful of the next wildfire. It's a matter of when, not if, and we've been very lucky, knock on wood. And I think that it should be a higher priority for all the communities in this region to really move forward with it. I think I would even advocate for fire breaks to the west of town and in certain areas to save lives and save property. I think that's very important. But in the interim, we'd really be looking at changes to the building code to really address fire resistant construction and mandate the fire resistant type of buildings. Talk about routes to escape. I'm working very closely with our emergency providers at having annual reviews and rehearsals, because I think a big part of that I found through going through the plan is you would go through this plan, it's a 9-month effort, and then it sits on a shelf and no one looks at it again. And then something happens and you're like, now what do I do? It's things like that that are important. But that's been my experiences in the planning end. But then I rely on the experts, and that's the emergency responders and the fire districts and things.
Definitely a topical question, given the time of year it is. Claudia, you have a second question?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Yes, we could. You're back on mute now.
Okay.
There we go. You're back again.
Sorry. I muted it on my phone as well as the *6. I get myself confused. So I have a little personal question, not too personal, but it's always interesting to hear what the answer to this one is. I love to use it in interviews. And it doesn't have anything to do with policy or procedure. My question is, if you could be any animal, what would you be and why?
Who wants to go first?
I'm sorry, is it me? I don't know, but I'm happy to go first. You know, actually, you asked that question, and the first thought I think of is my mom. And so my mom always says, if you're gonna come back, you know, after you know, your next life, it would be good to come back as an Eldora dog. And I'm gonna kind of own that right now because I moved here from Las Vegas. I have 2 dogs, and my dogs have never been happier in their lives than they are as Eldora dogs. They have the ability to run around. They're not kind of blocked into a gated area like at my old home. And so it's our environment. It's the beauty of our environment, and watching my dogs and how they've really flourished here. I think I would come back as an Eldora dog.
Perfect.
So my first animal that came to mind would be a chicken or rooster, but that's not a good thing to say publicly. Only because I only thought of it because I had like 35 chickens in my backyard, and I really love like rare and exotic chickens. But probably for the purpose of like work and how an animal that would equate to me would be probably a tortoise, slow, steady, hard shell, just keep plugging along until you get to the finish line.
A moose would work too, right?
Yeah. I'm not as dangerous.
I was gonna say, I thought this was gonna segue into the Carousel Happinesses mayoral election this weekend between I forgot what it is, the moose, the mermaid, and I forgot what the third candidate is, but Marshall Johns.
Thank you. Candidates, quick question for you. What do you see as a couple of the most biggest hurdles that the town of Nederland will be facing in the next couple of years?
Am I first for this one?
I think Ray, you're first.
So I think it's the development pressure, addressing the development pressure and balancing the development pressure and the environmental concerns, and having that delicate balance at the same time of having adequate staffing at a level to facilitate that appropriately. I think that's a challenge. I was surprised, if this is accurate, that you only have one water intake site for the town. Water rights are incredibly important, and I'm making sure that's secure. I was also looking through the budget, and I didn't see any costs, ongoing capital improvement costs for some of the buildings, City Hall, the community center. These things need to be addressed and reflected in the budget. So those are three that just come to mind.
Thank you.
So as I was writing down my notes, they are pretty similar. Infrastructure development, the impact on our community. So we are going to see that infill. People have a strong desire, and I think we saw that out of COVID too. When talking to people who purchase homes, a lot of them wanted to escape the city and come to Nederland or come to a mountain community. So we're seeing people want to move here. So we have that, and then the impact that has on our utilities and our infrastructure. And then I think that's the other ones are kind of the big topics that are coming forward: Big Springs egress, the IGA, things that may be contentious in nature, and really sorting out with the community, how do we get through those big projects, and what's the next steps for those?
Thank you.
All right, well, round two complete. Congratulations. Ninth inning stretch, stand up, shake it loose a little. I just want to remind everyone who's listening, anyone in the public who wants to chime in with questions, throw it in the chat log, and we will check those out and collate them for and ask our candidates. Otherwise, I'm going to kind of loosen this up even a little bit more. Instead of calling directly on people, we've had 2 rounds of questions. Third round of questions, sort of an optional round from the board members and the hiring committee. And I'll kick this one off because of I just happened to have one that came to mind. So let's say you get the job of Nederland Town Administrator, and you hold the position for 4 or 5 years. What do you see as kind of, what if you're 4 or 5 years from now in that position, what do you want to look back and see as your greatest success, or your thing that brings you most pride of having held this job for 4 or 5 years?
Should we let KarenG go first?
I know. I'm like, what does Karen like? Do you want her to go
Funny.
first? I think for me, it's community engagement, that we were able to really enhance our community commitment to this town. When I grew up here, everyone was really connected, and I think that's something that I took pride in, and it was in my cover letter, and we have still the makings of that, but we have so many new people coming in who maybe are still struggling with how do you get involved. And in Envision, someone gave a great example of, a welcome to Nederland packet. Here's how you get involved. And so what I'd like to see is just that we have more community engagement, that there is a better communication kind of in both ways, with the community and back to the municipal government. But that's what I'd like to see is that it's not necessarily kind of the small few who are involved, but it is the massive community, and that there's opportunities for them to participate if and where they feel appropriate. If they're not ready to get fully engaged and maybe in a board or commission, that they know that their voice is heard and they have ways in which to communicate what their desires are with all levels of our local government.
I'm glad you asked this question, because it's really important for me. It's hard to leave any job. It's an important commitment for me. And when I look back, I want to look back and say that I've accomplished something. And I think I can say that for my last 2 positions, that I've left the organization. Not that I've left Central City, but if I leave the organization, I've left it in a better position than it came, so that whoever comes and takes my seat, that they can run with it. That's of paramount importance to me. And in that same regard, when I came to Central, and I've been up here for so long, there's a lot of distrust between the city, the business, the bid, various organizations, and there was a lot of resentment, and it's taken years of engagement where that's really gone, and now we're starting to engage more. And I think of the most important is that there's, and I don't know what the exact, if this is similar to Nederland now or not, but I think it's important that when you leave it in a better place, and that the community is trusting of government, and the government is trusting of the community, and there's just a better, not to be sappy, but like love out there, that it's a better place for the community, and there's a process, and everyone knows what that expectation is, and there's no surprises, and it's not like if someone tried to slip someone through, because it's very clear as to step 1, step 2, and how it works and why things happen.
Great, thanks. I thought about as you guys were answering, I was thinking about opening this up to the questions. I think I will actually just call everyone. Don't feel any pressure when I call on you, just because we are looking here at the last half hour. We don't actually have any public questions yet, so I want to give the board another chance if they want, and then we'll give you guys a chance to kind of give a sort of a closing statement. If there's anything we've missed, if there's a question you were anticipating we didn't touch on it and you really had a great answer for it, let us have it then. So I'm gonna just call on the trustees and hiring board to see if they have if anyone has any final questions they want to ask before we go to that. I'm beginning with Alan, Trustee Apt. Since your video just popped up on the screen.
Yeah, the community value that everyone shares is sustainability, and we've been trying to achieve that as a community. What would you do to try to make the town of Nederland more sustainable overall?
Is that me?
Yeah, I think right.
Okay. So it was a similar question from earlier. I referenced EV charging is a way that really could bring that forward, but then I'm working closely with the board that works on that, and incorporate that into the comprehensive plan, and then incorporate that into the budget process as to where are the priorities, where are the goals, how do you want to get that accomplished? I know you have very ambitious goals on that, and we can work collectively to try and find how best to do that. My only example is EV charging station, and then I would just rely on the citizens and the experts that you have in Nederland. Beyond that point, I know you have a staff person that's dedicated to this.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know that at the recent Sustainability Advisory Board, we did kind of talk a little bit about this, and when the question was posed, how are we going to prioritize sustainability? I had mentioned that I think it needs to be a central focus in what we do, and envision the goal is to really weave sustainability throughout all of the goals and objectives and vision statements. And I know we're kind of working on finalizing that, but I'd like to see that, when staff propose projects or we bring forward ideas, that obviously, we include that sustainability component, but the Sustainability Advisory Board has a matrix in which to evaluate projects and to determine kind of what level of sustainability does it meet. And so utilizing that tool more and really running it through a variety of different projects that we have, and kind of using that as a matrix where before town staff bring a project to the Board of Trustees, we will have already assessed kind of where it ranks on that sustainability scale.
Thank you.
Eric Coombs Esmail.
Yeah, maybe I'll bring a question that a resident sort of casually and jokingly asked me to ask, but I think that it is relevant to the idea of working with maybe large corporations that control a lot of our infrastructure to some extent. And I'm thinking of obviously Excel with electricity and how that impacts sustainability, but I'm also thinking about CenturyLink and internet companies that kind of don't invest in our community and have left us being, on the other side of the digital divide in some ways. And we don't really have fast internet speeds, and we have many residents, especially residents in the Nederland area, who rely on town but may not live directly within town boundaries, who struggle with finding information and with getting out of their homes, especially when they're older. So I guess I wonder what your experiences have been working with these larger corporations, how you can advocate for a town as small as Nederland that makes up such a kind of minuscule amount of their overall revenue, and how to put us on the map as something that's worth investing in. I think
back to Excel, and obviously the Excel is very much a part of our world. But we had that Partners in Energy program, which gave us a really direct connection to Excel and the Excel representatives. And to me, it seems like from that program, we've been able to work more directly with the members of their teams. It's a lot easier to get a hold of them. I'll even tell you from a kind of a building standpoint, we have contacts there. So that partnership really has helped us to move forward in creating that connection. And so I think with other large stakeholders like that, like CenturyLink, seeing if we can identify partnerships or a person who maybe does support municipal governments and local businesses, maybe they have that liaison, who is that person? And maybe second to that, though, is if that doesn't exist and that we're not their priority, is evaluating the effectiveness of that partnership. I know internet is tough here, and it's not like we can just abandon CenturyLink, but maybe evaluating what are some of our other options, and communicating that to CenturyLink that we're struggling to find that partnership, that we're going to look alternative resources and other organizations we can team up with, or could we find a way to work together to meet the needs of the community. But finding kind of that in, I guess, and spending the time looking for that in would be really step one for me.
So we also went through Partners with the Energy, and I agree. It's been wonderful to actually have a contact with Excel. They actually donated 500-600 CO detectors for our community. They spent tens of thousands of dollars for us, which was amazing. And we are, 700 people, and it's just building that relationship. But we also had some issues with another utility provider, and we have a franchise agreement because they're in our roadways. So we went back and forth saying, you need to improve service, you need to address connectivity. And there was some lawyers involved, and we got improvements to service. But it's really about the franchise agreement and when it expires, and making sure you follow the dates and you follow that procedure. I think it's exciting from a federal standpoint that there's a big push for rural broadband. I think it's a tremendous opportunity, and I think we have a tremendous advocate with Governor Polis to really get this going in the mountain communities, not like kind of the start and stop that happened 8-10 years ago. So I'm hopeful that we can have a seat at the table and really advocate for rural mountain communities in Nederland specifically. And again, whether I'm the administrator or not, I think this is a great opportunity where we can really partner and get a community together and get all the peak-to-peak communities in the counties together and say, this is important, we want you to make it a priority, and that's the way to do it.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, I talked this week or earlier this week with KarenG about what her job is, because I figured that would be a baseline to evaluate candidates. And it dawned on me it's a really hard job, way harder than my job. And so at a core level, why are you pursuing this? What do you want to get out of this, and why would you do this?
So I would say it kind of goes back to my opening statements that I want to be engaged. I want to make sure that the process was transparent. I want to make sure that government is operating fairly for citizens. And if not me, who? I know there's going to be the good candidates out there, but I've been doing it so long, and it's so important that you have the right people. It's almost like it's a passion as much of a vocation, that it's about service to your community. And so that's why I want to serve in this capacity. And I've had great managers, and I've had everyone has their pros and cons, and I really have learned a lot over the 20 years I've been in the field and in local government collectively of how things work, how things don't work, and how to make improvements. And I just have a passion for rural America, rural Colorado, that it needs the passion and commitment from people like me, people like Miranda, to step up and say, yes, it's a very hard job, and it's hard to stay in that position for a long period of time, but it's important, and it's very important, and someone needs to do it, so why not me?
I've had that opportunity as the deputy town administrator to work side by side with Karen. So I think that in itself kind of gives me that insight to the job. We're a great team. We partner on a lot. And so there's not very many projects that either I'm involved with, or at least I know about them. I'm pretty aware of what's going on. And so knowing that, I think that doesn't steer me away from it by any means. I think it allows me to know definitely what I'm walking into, big shoes to fill. Definitely. And I feel that I have the skills and have been working with Karen to be able to really just keep us moving forward. And that learning curve is not very big. And so a lot of that is why, I feel like I'm qualified. I would be honored to have the position because it's something that's very important to me. This community is important to me. I kind of moved myself into these different roles and opportunities with Nederland because I had a desire to support and strengthen what we do here. And I just love that opportunity to keep doing so. I do feel I understand the expectations of the job, and I welcome them with open arms and knowing that that's what I would be stepping into.
All right, thank you, Tom. I'm going to jump in here. Instead of asking a question for myself, I'm actually going to ask a question we got from a member of the public. So this is from Don Baumhover, who's asking as a town resident, if you can both speak to the recreational pressures on the National Forest and the increasing number of transients in the summer months.
I think, I still kind of go back to the kind of subject matter experts of sorts. We have Niche, and we have the forest department and the food pantry. And for me, there is definitely an increase, and we're seeing that. And so it's a matter of supporting those entities and what it is that they feel that needs to take place. And so I know, in some areas we're looking at closures, or hours or limitations of camping. And so how do we assist them as they're trying to maybe create guidelines related to camping? What resources can we provide or can we support with that? I think Niche is a great opportunity to do that outreach. And so for me, I'd like to see how can we best support them in the work that they're doing, since they're at the front lines of tackling that challenge of campers coming into our forests. I know in town for the administrative assistant, we've seen a lot of people come into town hall asking for resources. And it's a matter of just being equipped of where to send them, what information do we need to provide them to also be safe as they are camping in legally zoned areas. How do they be safe in doing so?
So about 7 years ago, I was the staff rep from Gilpin for the sports shooting collaborative with the 4 counties. A similar issue of how do you address the users in the national forest, and it took a partnership to really advocate and find a solution. It wasn't a quick solution. It took a number of years, which I think was just resolved 2 years ago with areas constructed for sports shooting. I would imagine that it's going to take something similar to that, but it's going to take a while to get to that point. So from a local level, it's really reaching out to your district rangers, having those conversations, relaying, this is what's going on. I think their number is they have 2 rangers for the entire area, so they can't man all of the national forest. So it really falls to the citizens, unfortunately, to report and facilitate until it gets to this critical mass. Unfortunately, I wish it was a faster solution, but it really is just communicating and building those relationships so that we can get to the point of fixing it. Though I did see that the National Forest did close, I think 3 or 4 areas of the National Forest recently, which is an encouraging sign.
Thank you, guys. We are looking here at the last little bit of time. Larry Johns, do you have a third question?
I do, thank you. Barring financial assets or resources, what would you do if you could, if you had one project to do in town, what would that be?
From my end, I mentioned it before, it would be fire protection for the community and the intake structures. I think that's absolutely critical for the longevity of mountain communities with climate change. And there's not a good solution for that. It's very expensive, but I would think that would be the #1 project. It's not in town, but it will protect town for the long term.
Thank you.
I think for me, and kind of looking at Envision and maybe where we aren't already set up with teams who are working on it, is that affordable housing piece, and where do we find incentives to allow for affordable housing in our community, especially as we see that uptick in price of houses. How do we kind of counterbalance that with affordability?
Thank you.
Claudia?
Yes, I have one last question. I would like to know how, in the past, you have found the best way that you monitor the performance of your work, and then how you would apply that were you to get this job.
I consider myself to be very organized. And so for me, I have task trackers, project trackers that I use to just evaluate everything that I have going on and working on. I try not to drop balls very often. I definitely try to make sure I'm always on top of things and maintaining that consistent communication. So it's those same project trackers that I use and I've shared with other members of my team. That's the type of resource that I would keep in place just to make sure that we're always being consistent and moving forward on not only my projects and things in my world, but things that are happening within all the departments.
So I would echo the same thing, but I'm old fashioned, so I use a calendar and I keep track of dates. And that's important for me to make sure that things are done in a timely manner. There's a bunch of balls in the air, but it's also important to have the meeting with your staff. We have weekly meetings to communicate, to know exactly what's going on, what issues are arising, so they don't blow out of control. And then I would foresee there'd be regular department head meetings to have that communication, because no one wants any surprises, and a lot of the issues can be addressed early on. So it's about communication and time management ultimately.
And lastly but not least, Lindsay, did you have any final question? I think you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, just saying that I think that they've covered everything and appreciate them taking all this time to answer our questions so thoroughly.
All right. I will add one thing here, one final question for both of you, and then closing statements. I've been sitting here trying to parse it, and I think the question is something along the lines of, are you willing to do a deep dive into identifying and fixing the foundational documents code, I guess, of the community, and how would you go about that?
I think it's, I'm sorry, is it my turn? I don't want to. Yes, okay.
Go.
Yes, I think it's important to really address the codes in the community. We did that in the very beginning in Central City. We did get a grant for that. I think it was $100,000, but it was very important because we had a design guideline that didn't mesh with our land development code. We had a very complex land development code that was conflicting. We had a comprehensive plan that was done 20 years before that had a total different vision than the current leaders in the city. So that was the first thing that we did to try and correct that. So I think that's really an important first step, is identify where there's shortcomings and find the grant through DOLA to assist in doing that full redo. It's a major undertaking, so it really should be done by a team of consultants. And I know a number of people that have done it that are excellent, but I think that's really a first course of action. I mentioned it earlier that it seems like Nederland and Central City are kind of on parallel tracks, only in the sense of from the community development end. I think we're further ahead because of my time in the last 5 years and the focus that I've provided to that, which then I can transfer over to Nederland and kind of streamline the process. And a lot of the the important measures that you're concerned about now that need to be addressed are things that, not all of them, but some of them, I've already dealt with here, and we're in a better position. So I already have that track record.
In Netherlands, since I've been here, we have a document that outlines all the municipal code changes that need to occur because of inconsistencies or things that maybe don't match what currently is occurring in our community. And so we have been working on that slowly but surely with our attorney. It's tough, and I think financially, Ray brings up that point, is it's hard to do without grant funding to do a big overhaul. So I'm definitely interested in looking at that grant. Because without that, everything's just going to take time. But I do value that we are committed to making the ordinance changes, to cleaning up code and getting things sorted out that are inconsistent, and committed to continue to do that with or without that grant funding, but definitely looking for financial opportunities to do that overhaul, I think would be a great area of focus for the town.
DOLA provides the grants. That's the one we used. That was a few years ago, but I could definitely relay that information.
That'd be great.
All right. Well, thank you guys. 3 rounds of questions here. And, so we at least have tested that you might be okay to match, with our 4-hour board meeting. So we're testing your endurance a little bit here tonight. But
going for
I just
11
want to give you a
o'clock.
chance. Yeah, well, yeah. Just give you a chance to kind of close out. Again, like I said, if there's something we missed that you really wanted to highlight, an idea, give us an closing point on why you really want to take on this job. Then we will see you again tomorrow. And I think Ray, you went first on the introduction, so Miranda, you can go first on the closing. Okay. I feel like I'm in a presidential debate, making sure it's all back and forth.
When I did my opening, I acknowledged that coming back to Nederland to serve as a town clerk was important to me because this is the community I grew up in, and it helped to shape me. And so it's an honor to even be considered for town administrator, because that is an opportunity for me to give back to this community that's meant so much to me. And again, I am who I am because I grew up in Nederland, and I'd love that opportunity to continue to support in all the ways I have. But I know that I have so much more to give in terms of assisting with our future projects, assisting with our growth opportunities, and just supporting our departments and all the amazing things that they do. And so I appreciate that you're considering me and would love this opportunity.
I know I've touched on it a few times, but this is more than just a job for me, and I really have a passion for the area. So I was just thrilled that I had the opportunity to stay in the area versus move further away. So I just think there's so much opportunity in this area. Nederland, building bridges, bringing the community together. I've been doing this for so long that I really think I could be an asset to Nederland and really put them in a better position. And I like Miranda, I really am thankful of the opportunity for being selected to get this far. And I did mention to Karen that I had a little mixed feelings in the sense that I'm a big advocate for internal promotional positions. And if I would have known you had such a strong in-house candidate, I probably wouldn't have applied, but I really do appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we certainly appreciate the fact that we have, so two such incredible, exceptional candidates to choose from. I mean, we had a good list of all the applicants, and you guys absolutely rose to the top of the resumes we looked at and the people we took a look at, and just really appreciate both of you applying, being willing to do this. Appreciate the passion you have for small towns. Obviously, it's something a lot of us share, because we're doing this in our free time and as volunteer efforts, because we love these little mountain towns, and really appreciate you guys being a part of it. And I really appreciate the members of the Board of Trustees who joined us this afternoon for this interview, our hiring committee who put in hours of analysis and looking at these applications, and town staff that joined us today. And I know tomorrow is another opportunity to meet in person, 1 to 3 o'clock at our community center. I know I'm looking forward to meeting you in person there tomorrow, Ray, and I'm just seeing people in person again. It's just exciting. But just really appreciate everyone who's called in, members of the public, board members, our advisory board members, thank you guys all so much, and look forward to seeing you again soon. And
Thanks,
everyone have a
Rick.
great evening. It's a beautiful
Thank
evening
you so
out.
much.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Chris.
everybody.
Away from the screens.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Miranda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good work.
Karen, I have a question for you.
Can you turn this over to Peter now? Is that possible?
That's what my question was. Since you guys turned me into that, I'm trying to figure out how to
Peter, do you know
turn
how
it
to
down
do
first.
that?
Yeah, so if you go over to, like, if you go to participants and hover over Town Ned, you'll see the three dots. You should be able to just make me host again.
It says you're co-host.
Okay.
So that's why I was confused. Because it says right now you have the ball. So you are technically the presenter.
Oh, that's cool. That would be good.
Mostly I just want to know how to stop recording.
Yeah, that's what that was my concern, is that I didn't want to be hitting or logging out if that didn't happen correctly. I mean, I see the record button, and I have a stop pause button.
Yeah, if you want to stop it, because that got taken away from me when our internet dropped.
Okay, because I've got it here. We've got an hour and 54 minutes of recording, and I'll hit stop.
Yeah.
Do I want to stop? Separate file, pause the recording. Nope.